several years ago, Steve Callahan got lost at sea. He was actually shipwrecked, and he was lost at sea for 76 days. 76 days lost at sea. He had a raft, and he had like somewhat of a backpack that he was able to just scrounge up some things before he had to get out of the ship that was sinking fast. And so he had a backpack, and he grabbed a couple pencils, and he actually took those pencils. He took 3 pencils and formed together a sextant. Anybody know what a sextant is? Sounds a little crazy. It's this kind of like a compass thing. I don't even know the best way to describe it myself. It's kind of like a compass, but basically what it does is it'll tell you what latitudinal and longitudinal line you're on. And so he measured, using the sextant, he measured the distance from the sun to the horizon, and then he was able to figure out what latitudinal and longitudinal line, based on his knowledge of these 2 fixed realities, where the sun is and where the horizon is. It'll tell me where I am in the world. And because of his knowledge of that, he was able to push himself into the right current, and he found himself in the Caribbean, had a nice little vacation, and wrote a best-selling book, and he's doing great. Steve Callahan is doing great. Now, why do I tell you that? Because it was his understanding of fixed realities of the universe that helped him survive. And so tonight, I want to give you 2 fixed realities about the universe that will help you navigate this crazy world. Because the world is crazy. So 2 truths. We live in a world that literally calls itself post-truth. And here's what that means. Whatever truth means to you, if that's true for you, then that's great. But your truth doesn't have to be true for me. So you can like whatever gender you want, and that's fine. I can like a completely different gender, and we're both right. So we live in a world that is quote-unquote post-truth. And I'm here to tell you tonight that there are 2 truths, period, that we're going to face through tonight. You ready? And here's truth number 1. Humans have a tendency to run away from God. Humans have a tendency to run away from God. Here's tendency number 1 kind of played out in motion. When I went to this camp called the Windy Gap. It was a Young Life camp. Have y'all heard of Windy Gap? I've kind of told you guys about Windy Gap, or Young Life. Anybody knows Young Life? Everybody heard of Young Life? So we had this crazy camp in Asheville, North Carolina, and essentially it was a pretty loose camp. There wasn't a lot of strict dress code or anything like that, and so everybody really liked going to it, especially in my high school. So we went, and they had this thing called a Sadie Hawkins dance. Who's ever heard of a Sadie Hawkins dance? So basically, Sadie Hawkins dance is all the guys would line up, and then they would just take off, and then the girls would chase the guys, and then you would, if they like caught the guy, then you would, you'd like go out on a date with that person, or you'd have so we didn't really do a Sadie Hawkins dance. We actually did like a Sadie Hawkins dinner. So the girls would just chase a guy, and whatever guy they caught, they would have dinner with that person. And that was like Wednesday night of camp. We were leaving on Saturday, so it was like middle of camp. And so they gave you a few days to figure out, like, I want that girl to chase me, or I'm chasing that guy. And so we did that, and then I had gotten some reliable intel. I was not the coolest kid at this camp. I really wasn't that cool in high school. But I had gotten reliable intel that the most beautiful girl at camp, who was a senior, was going to chase after me. And I got pumped. And her name was Katie. And I ended up, what do you do in your mind if the most beautiful girl at camp, if you get reliable intel that she's going to come after you? What do? You lay up. You're going to lay grab. Oh, no, you got me. Oh, God. All right, I guess we're going to dinner. And I was fully prepared to do that. And then they said go, and something in me just decided to start running. And I ran so fast. And And Katie was faster, and so she ran after me. And I started, when she started catching up to me, like I started like dodging her like attempts to get me. Why? I don't know. I'm stupid. That's why. And it took her basically clotheslining me to, and then we went to dinner and had a great time. And here we go. It is insanity to run from someone's. I knew that it was a mercy thing, but she was beautiful and so I didn't care. It's pretty insane for me to run from somebody's grace towards me, right? But we all do that. God is so gracious, He's so mighty, and He's so massive, and we have a tendency to run away from Him. And it's kind of insane, right? And here's the second reality. It was grace for Katie to run after me. She had a boyfriend. I didn't care. And here's the second reality. The first tendency is that we all have a tendency to run. But the beauty of it is that God has a tendency to chase after us. Tonight I want to look at these two realities in the life of Jonah. So let's turn to Jonah chapter 1. All right? It's kind of towards the back of the Old Testament. And so if you're lost, go to like Matthew and then turn back a few books and you'll find it. All right? While you're turning there, let me kind of set the stage, and I'll read verse 1 for you. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come on me." So God invites Jonah. Jonah was a prophet. God invites Jonah, this man of God, on this crazy grand adventure. To go save some people who were lost. I mean, Nineveh was a wicked city. In fact, there's some stuff that they found out about Nineveh, and they published some of it. Like, they used to play soccer with people's skulls. That was fun. That's how Nineveh, that's how messed up Nineveh was. They published that. They also published that one time the king of Nineveh was going to come in and they just wanted to assert power on the neighboring town. And so he took the skin off the king and then put it up in the gate. They published that, and then there's things in Nineveh that they didn't publish. They were like, this is too crazy for the public to see. Worse than that stuff. Nineveh's a messed up city. It's a city that is known for their pride, known for their anger and their hatred of other people, and known for sexual sin. Nineveh is actually present-day northern Iraq. The city is Mosul. So imagine you and your relationship with the Lord, the God that created the air, the seas, and the land. He created everything. He invites you on a grand adventure to save people with him. And he's like, I want you to go to Mosul, the exact same place as God calls Jonah, to Nineveh, to like northern Iraq. And you're like, whoa. So here's what happens. Jonah, chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord comes to Jonah, the son of Amittai, and he says, "Get up, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come upon me." Verse 3. But Jonah got up and went down to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, got on a boat that was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, went down into it to go down with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. So God issues a call to you. Join me on a rescue mission in the world. Let's save the world together. In reality, so Jonah's like, just imagine that there's a map right here with me. And Jonah is here in the center. And God calls him to go to Nineveh. And Nineveh, he says, arise, get up, and go to Nineveh, the great city. And then Jonah's written with a lot of like word humor. And so the way that you're supposed to read verse 3 is actually the same way that you're supposed to read verse 2. Arise, go to Nineveh. So Jonah rose and fled down to Tarshish. So God tells him, Nineveh, and he goes this way. It's not like accidental. It's not like, oh man, I thought you said Nashville. What am I doing on the road? That's not what he's doing. He's deliberately going away from the presence of the Lord. He says it 3 times. I'm going to Tarshish. I'm going to Tarshish. I'm going to Tarshish. He's deliberately running away from the presence of the Lord. Why? Because all humans have a tendency to run. All humans have a tendency to run. In fact, let's even take it all the way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3. God creates mankind, and he creates you, and he creates Adam and Eve, and he creates them in perfect communion with them. Perfect communion. They've never known life outside of a relationship with them. And then they sin. And what's the result of their sin? What's the very first thing that they do? They run and they hide from God. Right? Think about Peter. Peter runs away. He denies Jesus 3 times, and his immediate response is to what? He runs away from the presence of God. You and I, we run away from the presence of God. So even in chapter 3 of Genesis, you see, so Adam and Eve sinned, they run away from the presence of God. Have you ever noticed this? This is crazy. In Jonah chapter 4, within one chapter, we have, within one chapter, we have violence and the degradation of women. The men run away, the people run away from the presence of God, and those are the 2 things that immediately follow. It's almost like our newspaper today, right? Hatred, violence, degradation of women. It's basically our newspaper. It's just like kind of your life, right? That we run away from God. It's a tendency that completely unites all of humanity. And so we all run away from it. There's actually this story about the Kennedy Center. Kennedy Center is in Washington, D.C. Right? Am I saying that right? It's in Washington, D.C. Kennedy Center, maybe? Yes? Okay. I just want to make sure I got the city right. The city's not out of order. There's a story about the Kennedy Center, and the Kennedy Center gift shop was hemorrhaging money. Like, money was just disappearing in the gift shop. The gift shop is not the main attraction that you come to the Kennedy Center. But it was kind of getting a big deal. They were losing like up to $150,000 a year. So they're like, oh my gosh, somebody's stealing $150,000 a year from this bookshop, from this gift shop. We need to figure out what's going on. And so they hire a detective. The detective actually is, his name, it sounds like I'm making it up. I promise I'm not. His name is Dr. Lovelace, or Detective Lovelace, not doctor. He's not a doctor, he's a detective. They hire a detective, and his name is Detective Lovelace, and they mark some bills, and then they go to the guy. They were like, it must be the guy that takes the money from the cashier's box into the bank. It must be him, because he's the one that has the money for the longest period of time it's unaccounted for. So let's check him. And so they caught him, and they emptied his pockets, and they caught him. $60 in his pocket. Okay, maybe. But where's the rest of the $149,940? That's the question. And so they do this crazy overhaul, and they look at everyone, and they just overhaul the entire system, and they do a deep dive look into all of the practices of the gift shop, from open to close. And you know who Detective Lawless found out was stealing money? Everybody. A homeless guy would come in off the street, and there's a donation jar in there to support the arts, and he would say, I've had my life hard enough, and he would take some money for bus fare. A guy came in and paid $3,000 for a box suite and said, well, I deserve a free t-shirt. I paid that much for a ticket, and so he'd just take a t-shirt off the shelf. People wouldn't, the people that were checking people out wouldn't check them out right, and so things were going missing. There was just a lot of malpractice, and the detective said this about his finding. He said, that is the day, he was young, he's an older man telling the story now, and he said, that was the day that I realized it. That was the day that I realized that every single person, from sports jacket to homeless man, is evil. Everyone is evil. We all have a tendency, all of us, to run. To run. And the best thing that you can do, is to figure out how and where you run to. How and where you run. The Apostle Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament, he considered himself faultless when it came to the law. He said, I kept the law, I was blameless. He said, I never lied, never stole anything, never looked at another woman lustfully. I was good. I was good on the law. Never killed anyone. Now, that one was a little close because he actually approved of people's killing. He persecuted Christians, but he didn't do it himself. Like, he never killed a guy. He just approved of people killing a guy, like he did in Acts chapter 6. And he said, I was blameless when it came to the law. And he was like, I'm good. Never stole, never kept any other gods. And then it said, coveting. And he was like, ooh, got me. He was almost perfect, but he had a coveting problem. I think of St. Augustine. St. Augustine's one of history's greatest theologians. He wrote a lot of the way that we think about God today is informed a lot by St. Augustine. And he's known as one of the greatest minds to ever study theology. And he was a sex addict. That was where he ran. And what is it for you? What is it for you? Where do you go? Where do you run? Because here's why it's important for you to know. Everybody runs, and there will always be a boat going to Tarshish. There will always be a place. There will always be a way for you to off-ramp. Life can get stressful, and in the stress of life, the enemy will provide an oasis. He will. You can always find a boat sailing in the wrong direction. This is what Jonah does. He runs. Not accidentally. He runs away from the presence of the Lord. So what's God going to do? Is he going to just let him go? It's not like an angel's up in heaven and be like, oh my gosh, we lost him. Where is he? He was just in Joppa, but now he's like, he's off the mount. We have no idea. What's he doing? All right, well, I guess we'll just let him go. Amos, come on, you're up. He's not going to say that. What's he going to do? Let's find out in verse 4. And the Lord hurled a great wind on the sea, and there was a great storm on the sea, so that the ship was about to break up. And then the sailors became very afraid. And every man cried out to his God, and they threw the cargo which was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone into the hold of the ship. He laid down, and he fell asleep. So, what's God going to do? He's going to chase after you. That's the tendency of what God does. All of humankind runs away, but God chases. And isn't it good that we don't have a God that's just like, you know what? I died for you. Shouldn't that be enough? No, he chases after you. He chases after you. Listen, there's just a few fun things for you to hear. Listen to verse 5. So God throws a storm, and the sailors become very afraid, and they start crying out to their gods, and then they threw the cargo. Just kidding, it was in verse 4, sorry. The Lord hurled a great wind on the sea. There was a great storm on the sea, so bad that the ship was about to break up. Actually, this is one of the only times in Scripture that Scripture applies thinking to an inanimate object. This storm is so bad that seasoned sailors, this is their life to be sailors. They're freaking out. The storm is so bad that the ship is threatening. It's like, this is terrible. The ship is thinking. It's like one of the only personifications in Scripture. It's a bad, bad, bad storm. And that's how God will chase after you. Oftentimes he'll send a storm. And I want to give you a couple storms that he sends. You ready? Storm number 1, if you're taking notes, he will not give you what you want. He'll frustrate your efforts. He'll make it hard for you to just walk down the road towards Him. That's what He's doing here. He's making it hard. I think of even in I think in Jonah. Listen to some of the wording. There's a word that's repeated in 1 through 6, and it's God calls him, "Arise, get up," and Jonah goes down to Tarshish. He goes down to Joppa. He goes down to the dockyard. He pays the fare. He goes down into the boat. He goes down into the away from the presence of the Lord. And Jonah had gone down below the hold of the ship. He laid down and he'd fallen down asleep. What's the word that's repeated? Down. This is what God will do for you. Your world will begin to spiral down, 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 down. And that seems like God is just like mad at you, but that's God in His grace trying to keep you from a life of sin. So, your life will just continue to go down, down, down. He does so by sending a storm. What do you see Jonah doing here? He's asleep. And can I tell you that that's like one of the saddest things that I feel like I see too often in student ministry? Is that people who, like, even past students, like I can tell what type of life students that I've had when I like see them out randomly. And there's some students, "Chris, what's up? I love you, man. How are you doing? I miss you guys. Hope you guys are doing well." And then there's other students that I see, and I'm not casting shame, I'm just telling you the reality of it, that I can tell what students are living lives of sin and that aren't embracing the lifestyle of Christianity. Because when I see them, it's like they're a shadow or they're a shell of their former self or they're a shell of who God's called them to be. God's called them to desperately to engage in a world that desperately needs them to be, and they're not. And so there's not any joy in their life because the joy of the Lord is our strength. So they're down. The imagery that the book is giving is Jesus says, "Get up." It's like lift up your eyes. Is literally what the word rise means. Lift up your eyes. Jonah goes down, 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 down. He's falling asleep. Keith Green wrote a song in the 80s called "Sleep in the Light." He describes much of the church today looking like this. That there's a world that desperately needs us to engage. There's a Nineveh that needs our words. And we're just asleep. We're asleep. So that's the first type of storm that God sends. The second type is that He will give you what you're after. And that's a little scarier to me. It's like your parents, when you've asked them, "Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? I know that it's against your rules, but please just let me." And they finally, after months of you tirading them, they just say, "All right, you know what? Do whatever you want." And they walk away. You know that feeling. That's a terrible feeling. Romans 1 describes it like this, that God will give people over to their sinful lusts and desires. That God will give you what you think you're after, what you think is going to bring you happiness. Think of Luke chapter 5. Peter is a fisherman, and Jesus comes up and he's calling Peter for the first time, and he says, "You know what? Why don't you go out, cast your nets on the other side? You're after the catch of a lifetime. You think that success is going to be found in bringing the fish in, making the catch of a lifetime? All right, Peter, come on, let's go out in the boat." So he gets in the boat with him, and he says, "Cast your nets on the right side this time." So he does, and then when he starts to bring it in, what happens? The nets are overflowing. He puts it into the boat, and then what starts happening in the boat, you know? The boat starts to sink, and there's this moment of terror in Peter's eyes. Because God let him see where the end of his rope was taking. I think of Jim Carrey. I think of way too many celebrities that have hit the pinnacle of life and success that we describe it as American culture. And then in their life. I think of Jim Carrey, who said, who was at that point and then found another way. He said, I just wish everyone could get rich and famous, have everything that they've ever wanted, ever dreamed of, so that they can know that it's not the answer. So maybe that's the storm that God will send you. He might send you the storm of not letting you have what you want. He'll frustrate your efforts in His grace. Or, in His mercy, He might give you over to your desires. Verse 6, so the captain approaches him. This is the shift in the book. You ready? So the captain approaches him and says, how is it that you're asleep right now? The storm is about to break our ship open. He says, get up and call on your God. Notice he says the same first word that God says. Get up! Call on your God. Perhaps your God will be concerned about us so that we don't perish. And each man said to his mate, come, let us cast lots so we can learn on whose account this calamity has struck us. So they cast lots and the lot fell on Jonah. We're not going to get into casting lots. It's kind of like gambling, but not really. It's like an Old Testament way that they figured out God's provision in their life and like figuring out what it's kind of like an 8-ball, like the magic 8-ball. You like, should I date this girl? No. Should I date this girl? Maybe. I'll take it. So it's kind of like that. They would cast lots, except it had actual like Jewish divine stuff in it, and so it fell on Jonah. And in verse 8, tell us now on whose account has this calamity struck us? What's your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? And so here's the question that we're about to figure out in this passage. All of humankind runs, but God has a kindness to chase after us. And the question that we need to deal with right here is what is our response going to be when God maybe clotheslines us like that girl did to me? When He catches up to us, what's our response going to be? Here's Jonah's. It starts with confession. That's the first thing. Verse 9, he said to him, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. I'm a Hebrew. I fear God, the maker of the air, the land, and the sea. Can you imagine what your response would have been if you were on the boat? Probably the same as them. You ready? Verse 10. Then the men became extremely scared, and they said to him, how could you do this to us? For they knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he'd already told them. So it's almost like we found out here that when he first got on the boat, they were like, what you doing here, man? And he's like, just running from God. And they were like, all right, weirdo. But now, and you see this often, don't you? When stuff starts to happen in your world, when things don't get too good, everybody starts to call on God. God, I need you to fix this problem. And it's for the first time that these non-believers start to care about God. And what do they say? Are you telling me that you are running from the God who's in charge of the sea on a boat? On my boat? So they said to him, verse 11, what should we do to you so that the sea will become calm for us? Because the sea was becoming increasingly stormy. Here's a good little truth. A lot of times, so specifically for me, even in ministry, I feel like there's a lot of times that there's a lot of pressure on Christians today to be perfect, or your witness is going to be ruined. You can't mess up, and if you do, everybody's just going to say, see, I knew he was a hypocrite. I knew she was just talking a game, and she doesn't really love God as much. God's really not. That's the fear in a lot of tendencies today, but when the man of God in Jonah 1 gets honest about his sin, non-believers start to care about the Lord. When the man of God confesses, here's who I am, here's what I believe, and here's what I've done wrong, revival happens on a ship of non-believers, of pagan worshipers. See, every other time in verse 5, they're calling out to their little g gods. And they tell Jonah, call on the little g God. Call on your little g God. Check out what happens in verse 12. He said to him, pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea becomes calm for you, for I know that on account of me this great storm has come on you. I know that God's chasing after you. However, the men rowed desperately. They do something valiant. They want to save his life. They try to get back to shore, but the storm is getting heavier and heavier. Verse 14. And then they called on, you see it in the text? They called on what? They called on the Lord, but it's all caps Lord. That the man of God gets honest about his sin. Because you know what, I'm not perfect. That the Christian gets honest and confesses, and then other people turn to the Lord too. Oh Lord, they cry. We earnestly pray, don't let us perish on account of this man's life. And don't put innocent blood on us, for you, O Lord, have done as you please. Here's the other thing I want you to see. Your sin doesn't just affect you. Your running from God doesn't just affect you. Jonah runs from God and he puts an entire ship in death's way. And then, what happens? Well, the second thing that should be our response tonight from our running from God. The first is confession, that we get honest. And then secondly, we need to repent. Repent. The definition of repentance is I'm walking one way, and then I turn and walk the other way. And that's what Jonah does here. Let's read it. Verse 15, so they picked up Jonah, and they threw him into the sea, and the sea stopped its raging. Then the men feared the Lord greatly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord, and made vows. Is this Jonah? What is this? Is this him being a cry? Is this him saying, well, I guess the Lord got me. I guess he finally caught up to me. My life of sinfulness. I guess he's about to judge me. Is this a suicide mission? No. See, the key here is verse 9, right? I'm a Hebrew. I serve the God of the air, the land, and the sea. God controls all of this, so just throw me to him. Throw me to him. So he repents. I'm running away. I'm not running away anymore. I'm running to him. I'm going to throw myself into him. So he throws himself into the sea. And that's on the table for you. I don't know where your life is. I don't know your story. I know a lot of your stories. But I know this, Jonah's a prophet too. And he's running away from God. Like he's already a child of God. Yeah? And he needs to confess and repent. So this isn't just for non-believers in here tonight. This is for non-believers in here completely. Jesus comes on the scene in the New Testament and he says the same exact thing. Repent and believe. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is God and believe in your heart and you will be saved. Confess and repent. It's the two things necessary for salvation. Confession and repentance. So where are you running? Where are you going? And I know tonight there's a beautiful option on display. You don't have to run anymore. I don't know where you came in tonight. I don't know the ins and outs of everything going on in your world, but I know that it's on the table, that everybody can walk out of this place and make the decision. I'm going to stop running. I'm going to confess. I'm going to repent and run towards him. I'm going to stop running away from him, and I'm going to run towards him. I think of my own life, and I was sitting in these chairs, not these exact ones. But I was a leader in my youth ministry. And I was the one that prayed before services, and I was the first one to sign up for mission trips and summer camps and D-Nows, and I was the guy. I was the youth group favorite because I grew up there. And my heart was cold as ice with things of God. In my world, I was running away from it. And everyone else, I looked great. Everyone else, I looked great. But I knew here I was running away. And it wasn't until about my sophomore year that I decided to get honest and to stop running away from them. And that's when my life changed. You have no idea how hard I prayed for that for you guys. That's what keeps me up at night. For you. You have no idea that that's what God's doing. And you're like, why is God frustrating my life? He must hate me. No, he doesn't. It's an act of love. It's an act of grace. In fact, the very last verse of chapter 1, verse 17. Jonah's going down, 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 because he's lived a life of going down, down, down. And he turns, confesses, and he repents, and he throws himself to God, and then God appoints a fish to swallow him up. Another kind of weird thing here is there's actually a Hebrew word for whale, and they don't use it here. So I just imagine, this is probably not the right time, I just imagine it says it's a fish. I just imagine this giant goldfish coming to swallow up Jonah. Because it doesn't say whale, it says fish. You're smart people. And that's not an act of judgment either. That's not an act of judgment. When I was a kid, that's how I read it. Oh man, if you run away from God, you're going to get swallowed by a fish. No, he's going to drown. And God swallows him up. He's in the belly of the fish for 3 days. Fast forward. As soon as that is over, as soon as he's vomited up on the dry land, God gives him the same exact call. He doesn't miss a beat. He doesn't say, you stupid. Now, you better be glad that I'm still asking you to do this. Go to Nineveh. No, he just says the same thing. There's no condemnation there. He just says, get up and go to Nineveh. And that time he does. And he lives an incredible life, watches revival happen in his city. That's what's going to take. There's a world that desperately, desperately, desperately needs you to engage. There's people who are asleep in the dark, as Keith Green would say in the 80s. And we, men of God, women of God, guys of God, girls of God, are asleep, not in the dark, asleep in the light. But Jonah's at the bottom of, and maybe we are at the bottom of a ship, and we're asleep, and there's a world up there freaking out because they get the same headlines and news lines as we do, and they don't know that it's going to end, that God has got the victory. So maybe that's the call for you. To wake up and to speak up. I don't know what it is, but I know that it's something. I know that it's for me. So I'm going to let the Lord kind of speak to you about it. And I just want you to ask this question. Lord, what do you want me to do with what you've told me about? And I'm going to give us 2 minutes. And then I'm going to pray and we're going to go to small groups. Lord, what do you want us to do with what you spoke to us about tonight? we thank you that you don't stop running after us. God of heaven, we ask that you would convict us and help us to see that confession is the way out. Repentance is the way out. Let's speak to our hearts tonight as we go to small groups and as we just kind of unpack what you're doing in us. We just thank you that you chase. We're sorry that we run. Forgive us. It's your name we pray. Hey, as you go to small groups, please don't forget. Listen, high school retreat is really, really going to be awesome. We've never done one before, and we're doing it here because I don't want it to be like this crazy experience. Like, man, God was at this retreat way off in the wilderness, but not right here. I want it to be here, and I want you to experience the Lord right here. And so, man, come on, like seriously, bring people. It's going to be a good weekend. We're gonna be at a different rhythm and pace than we normally run, and it's going to be good. So, if you can, November 15th, 16th, and 17th, $50. And hear me now. Do not let $50 stop you from coming. Do not let $50 stop you from coming. I am sure that there are people in this church that would say, I would gladly let this person come. I'll pay her for $50 if you can't do it. Okay, so you just let me know and we'll start praying together. Hey, love you. Let's go to small groups and kind of unpack what the Lord's been doing tonight. I'll see you on Sunday.
And I was like, shit.
The room's up in the
I do.
My laptop.